Everybody's always looking for taller farmhouse nightstands. This nightstand used to be a vanity. Zeb's going to show you how he took it apart and turned one vanity into two nightstands, and then I'll show you how I'm going to paint them and make them all chippy and farmhouse.
What we've got here is an old vanity. Someone decoupaged the top, and Jami had always intended on making it into some nightstands. So when she picked it up, it wouldn't fit in the back of our SUV like this. She had another dresser in the back, and so she just had the guy she was picking it up from cut it. That's all right though, because I'm going to take it apart. It's missing some wheels. We got to get rid of this decoupage, and then I'm going to remove these pieces here, and we're going to make a couple of awesome nightstands out of it. When it was originally constructed, this piece here is just doweled in. So I'm just going to take a hammer. I'll just cut these off with a handsaw, pull these nails, and then I need to find some wheels. Looks like there's a little bit of damage on this back leg. I'll have to glue that together as well. I couldn't find my new saw, so I've resorted to this really old Stanley saw. I went digging through my stash of old wheels because I have that, and this isn't an exact match, but it is the same size on the wheel. So pop that up into the socket. I'm going to have to do some Bondo repair on these legs in the back. They're pretty cracked and broken. This one here I'm getting glued up. I'm going to repair that back leg that's split and has a chunk of wood missing with Bondo. This is their all-purpose putty. It's not a bad idea to wear gloves. It will stick to you. And respirator, because this stuff's stinky. I'm just going to be using an old piece of scrap wood. When you buy the Bondo, it comes with cream hardener. I just use a little tiny drop, and I've never had a problem with it hardening up. I've already got some wood glue working on this split. I'm just going to take this Bondo. You don't have a lot of open time once you add that cream hardener. You've got about 3-4 minutes, and then it starts hardening up pretty quick on you. So it's not perfectly smooth. I'm going to leave that a little bit built up so I can come back in and sand it all flush to the normal size of the leg there. So it turns out this isn't decoupage. Someone just put some wallpaper on this. I'm going to just take the heat gun, heat that up, and see if I can scrape it off. All that old nasty wallpaper's off, but it kind of left a little bit of sticky glue residue behind. I'm just going to sand that off with some 150 grit. Alright, respirator back on. I'm going to sand this leg back to shape.
The first thing I did was I took all-purpose cleaner, cleaned the whole piece, and got off all the grease and grime from over the years. When you're using DIY paint, Fairy Chalkmother, Sweet Pickens, any of the brands that I carry, it's very important to get your piece clean. This doesn't have a lot of sheen, so I didn't worry about sanding it down. I'm just going to get right to painting. Alright, so I'm using Fairy Chalkmother and Snowflake, which is a chalky matte type paint. It goes on pretty smooth, it's self-leveling, and it's our whitest white that we carry out of all of our paint brands. I'm using my Paint Pixie brush, and I'm just putting on my base coat. I like to get the paint on there, and then I smooth it out. I know if you're watching me, it's probably bugging you that I'm painting it in like 50 different directions, but I'm also painting with my left hand. It's not my best hand. So once I get the paint on there, I like to smooth it out. So when I'm painting round legs, instead of going up and down, I go side to side. That way I can get in all the details and cracks. Just feel like it's a lot faster. All right, pretty much anytime you paint something this old, you're gonna have bleed through, which is the tannins from the wood underneath. Also the oils, because people oiled their furniture a lot. So you can see that it's coming through right here and right here. A lot of times people think that when they seal it and this comes through, that is the sealer. And what it is bleed through, and this is the way you fix it. So I'm gonna do 2 to 3 coats of this everywhere that there's bleed through, which is basically the whole shebang. And then I will repaint and then distress and seal it. Make sure that you're wearing a mask when you're using shellac. It isn't something that you want to breathe in. All right, so you can see the yellow's coming through and it's all shiny because we've shellacked it. This is my 3rd coat of paint going right over that shellac. I'll probably do 2 coats over the shellac just to make sure it's all the way covered. It's kind of frustrating when you're working on something and you get bleed through, but it's just part of life. It would be a whole lot easier for me to spray these with my spray gun, but it's winter and the garage is full. So I'm brushing, and when I'm all done, I will go over all of this with sandpaper and smooth it all out and make it look chippy. I'm gonna show you also over here, this is blue. This is probably some sort of permanent marker. And I had to shellac over it, and then it's kind of covered now. 1 more coat of paint and it'll be all the way covered. This happens a ton with old furniture. The longer it's had a life, the more it's had to get off of it. Cleaning it is really key, but sometimes you still get bleed through. You can't get frustrated, you just have to take a breath, get some shellac, and keep on painting. I promise you, when you're all finished, it'll be worth it. All right, so now I'm gonna sand these down. I'm using my mask to make sure that my lungs are protected, and I'm using my orbital sander with 220 sandpaper. You could also do like a wet distress, but because we shellac these, the only way that I'm gonna get through that shellac down to the dark below is to use a sander, because now that shellac is a barrier that water won't penetrate, so a wet distress really wouldn't work for that. Sometimes when you seal things with like a liquid sealer, it can cause more bleed through, no matter what kind you use. So I'm just gonna wax this so that way, hopefully, we have the bleed through under control. So the liquid sealers that we carry don't cause it to yellow. It's just any liquid sealer in general. If it's gonna bleed through, comes through because you activate that paint and then it just pulls the bleed through. So when you wax it, it doesn't do that. Sometimes I still wind up using the liquid sealers and then dealing with the bleed through as it happens because I need to use them for more durability. But this is a nightstand, so I'll make sure that I do like 2 or 3 coats of wax on top and 1 good coat over the base and buff it in really good, and it'll have plenty of protection. I'm just using our wax brush. You can get this at JamiRayVintage.com. It's probably, I think it's our most expensive brush, but if you take good care of it, you're only gonna need the one for quite a few years. I'm just lightly, you don't want to put on so much wax that it's like gunky. And then I usually let my wax sit for about 2 hours and then I buff it in. To buff it in, I use either my wax brush with no wax on it, like I'll make sure all the excess wax is off of it and then I'll buff it in with that. Or I use a lint-free rag and buff it on with that. It's most important that you don't have any chunks and that it doesn't feel waxy. In 2 to 4 weeks, your wax will get hard and it'll protect your piece. You don't have to wait to use it. You can go ahead and use it after a few days. Just be careful for that first month while that wax is curing. Okay, so I just wanted to real quickly show you buffing. I've removed all the excess wax from my brush, and I'm just taking my brush and making sure that all that wax is buffed in there, and it gets kind of like a nice smooth finish. If it feels super waxy still, then you can take a lint-free rag and do the same motion in circles and buff it all the way in. And actually, I've even seen people buff it into a sheen. You can do that as well. Or if you have like one of those electric buffers, that would also work.
All right, so I got the repairs all done, and then I handed them over to Jami, and she made them look amazing.
Oh, you're so sweet to me.
Yeah, they look great.
You know, I've painted a piece or two in my life.
It was a little bit of a struggle with the bleed through.
Yeah, you know, here's the thing. Like, I feel like sometimes people think, they're like, you make it look so easy. Sometimes I struggle too. And if you're going to paint a really old piece of furniture and you're going to paint it white, you're going to have bleed through or any light color. Just have some shellac on hand. Too many pillows?
Yeah. The decorative pillows kill me.
So, a few tips and tricks to keep in mind when you're painting white furniture. Some people shellac it before you paint it. I like to get a couple coats of paint on there because I know it's going to take me 3 to 4 coats anyways with white to cover it. So I do 2 coats and then I shellac 2 to 3 coats of shellac anywhere where there's bleed through. There was a spot over here that had marker. Marker's the worst. So we actually did 3 coats of shellac on the marker and then 2 coats everywhere else that there was bleed through. And then we put on the 3rd coat, and the 3rd coat is really where I check and see if there's any more bleed through. And it wasn't quite completely covered because this snowflake is really white, doesn't have a lot of pigment. So I went ahead and did a 4th coat, got complete coverage on the 4th coat, didn't have any additional bleed through. And then instead of sealing it with like a, a liquid top coat, like Big Top or polyacrylic or anything, I actually waxed them because it's less likely when you wax to cause any additional bleed through. Because when you put on like a liquid top coat, then sometimes that will reactivate the bleed through and bring it back through. Anything you didn't get covered, so.
Yeah, I especially love it when like kids write their name in the Sharpie marker or whatever.
Did you see my eye twitching? Oh, that's the worst.
But the shellac works. It'll get it off. Or
they carve their name and then you don't notice it until you're distressing it and then their name clearly comes out. Gosh. I think they turned out beautiful. We used Fairy Chalk when they're in Snowflake, and we used the DIY clear wax. We used the Paint Pixie brush and the Paint Pixie wax brush. All those things you can get at JamiRayVintage.com. And if you have any other questions about white or chippy or the way we separate them, comment below.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to go chopping up all the vanities. But for the most part, people don't use vanities anymore. So it was a great solution to make an old piece of furniture usable again.
Well, the vanities that have the solid top, those people use as desks and vanities. But this style where the solid piece is down below,
yeah.
I mean, nobody's going to bend over and grab their makeup. It doesn't make sense. So they're more for looks than anything. This is a more usable. And everybody is always looking for tall, skinny nightstands because some people have smaller bedrooms. And they have a king-size bed, so they don't have a lot of width, but their bed's tall. So this is great. And it is adjustable because if you take off the wheels, it would go just a little bit lower. Yeah,
you get about 1.5 inches. Probably about 1 inch with the wheels off.
So you can go 1 inch lower if you need to on it. Anyways, I think it turned out great. Be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to Jami Ray Vintage for more
DIY.